And then I don't know if you've ever used StreamYard before by chance, Flake, but over on the side, if there is any comments in the YouTube chat, they'll actually pop up in here.
Oh,
So
cool. Okay.
and then in the private chat, if you need anything, you can type in there, and just us three can see that.
Sounds good.
So, sweet. Okay, I think everything looks good on my end.
I've been using this for 13 weeks in total now, and I did not know that YouTube comments showed up right here.
What?
Never knew it.
Sir, sir, excuse me.
I never got past the private chat thing. I never swiped to the right of that. So I would always have like that, and then I would have YouTube pulled up over here so I could see the other comments.
Episode 13, and you're just
Bam.
More tabs is more danger, and I'm not. Yeah, I'm very risk averse, so we're not going to do that.
You're right. You're
Oh
right.
my
One less tab for me. That'll take that down to.
Yeah, it just sounds like more responsibility, and I'm not prepared for that.
I understand. Totally
I
get it.
live by the tabs, and I will die by the tabs.
No, my tabs will
usually
die by
have,
me.
like-
Because I am consistently getting rid of tabs.
Yep. I think if I have 6 tabs in a window open, that's like the minimal for me. I usually have like 20,
You know how many
30
I'm running?
tabs.
You want to know? 2.
Ugh. What? One on each monitor? What is that?
Yeah, one here, one there.
Oh, why so? Okay. That's painful. All right. Hey, Charmer's here too. Hello, sir. Thank you so much for hanging out. Perfect. Okay. Wow. Are you both ready? All right. I didn't change the number of the episode. That's 13. Okay. There we go. You know. Welcome to episode 13 of the TCCG Roundtable. We're your hosts, dragonrider and Itachi. How's it going?
It's going great. Loving the nerd life, living up the culture. I smell, hadn't showered in weeks. I fit right in.
Well, okay. I would recommend you probably fix that after we're done recording. Not right now. Like, let's finish recording and then maybe address that.
Have an announcement
but-
about that later, but you'll see.
Perfect. Well, we also have a wonderful, wonderful special guest with us this week, the incredible Flake. How's it going?
It's going well. I was not expecting any adjectives associated to my name, but I'll take it. It's pretty damn good. I too have not showered. I did receive the notes ahead of time, so I made. Not only did I not shower, I put on a garbage bag and then did the stairs of my apartment. So that's just to get the ripeness to the right level here.
So not only do we stink, we communicate our phases. We're gamers at heart.
Damn right. Damn right. Sometimes smell is my advantage at the gamer table. That's kind of like it should go. That's why I'm poised to be the next Smash Brothers champion. That's where it goes. That's the upper echelon of smell.
These are really the strats that y'all came for, right? Y'all came to this podcast to listen for these in-depth analysis and strats right here. So if you want to win at your next local, they've got your inside info right here.
It's just how it works. The worse that your opponent feels because they're nauseous because you smell like a garbage can, the better your chances of winning. I mean, it's a very simple science. You don't get much easier than the ratio between smell and concede.
Okay, well, some sort of nose plugs is going to be added to my next tournament list of things to bring, and duly noted. Thank you. Oh my gosh. Well, we usually start the episode when we have a guest with a little bit of background about you, kind of like a little mini interview. So definitely, please, we would love to hear about your background. Like, what got you into card games? I know you were talking a little bit before we started recording, like about all of the cards you have. So I'm excited to hear this background. But what got you into cards? What do you play? What have you played? What are you going to be playing. That might be a little bit of
Important.
like, inside info that I have that the listeners don't. But tell us about just your history with card games.
Well, I mean, within my wingspan, there's like I have access to about 7 or 8 different like TCGs that I play and have played like recently within the past like several months. So I play a ton of card games, but it all originates. The first one that kind of really gripped me was Star Wars CCG by Decipher, way back when I was like 12 years old or so, and a lot of that just stemmed from the fact that where I grew up and when I was growing up, I didn't really have many friends nearby. Like I had friends, but they were all, I didn't have the internet, Uber didn't exist, and my parents didn't want to drive me somewhere. So I just went and sorted through cards and played card games by myself, essentially. And Star Wars was something that I really adored. So I really got into that, and that essentially turned into every Friday after school, I'd go to the LGS with a couple friends, and we'd play there. And you go through school, and eventually, at the time, card games were not cool. Like you couldn't just go out and roll into high school. You know all about this, dude. Like it's you're not getting dates by showing off your foil Darth Maul. That wasn't a panty dropper by any means. That was not happening. So, but as life kind of progressed and graduating and stuff like that, that's where I rediscovered card games digitally with Hearthstone, and that brought me back to Magic, which then turned into all kinds of other card games, which essentially launched my career in broadcasting card games. And that's where I am today. But it all was from that original kind of launch pad, which was Star Wars CCG.
Awesome. So I asked this before we started, but I'm just to get a broad overview of just how many tentacles you have. Tell the viewers what games you have played altogether.
Oh,
that comprehensive list that you just gave.
So there's an old video I made on my defunct YouTube channel that will rank the top 10 card games I've ever played. And when I did that video, I made that video maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. And when I did it, I had counted all the card games I had ever played a game of. And I think that was up to like 21 or 22. Digital, non-digital, or whatever. Now that has probably expanded by another 5 or 6 because card games like Genesis, Battle of Champions, Flesh and Blood, which is a massive part of my life, all the way through till God knows what's coming around the bend. The new Bandai game that's coming out, One Piece, I'm interested in it as well.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you want to talk about the ones that I've really sunk them, the way that you evaluate it is like how much money have you spent on it or how much time have you wasted on it, right? Like that's those are two metrics that are the two titans that are going to be clashing when it comes down to who actually wins. Hearthstone has a lot of my hours. Gwent has a metric assload of my hours. Magic, Flesh and Blood, like I don't. It's hard for me to really evaluate, but I mean, Star Wars CCG, Lord of the Rings TCG, these are the two that I've really put a lot of love into as well, and I continue to cherish. I would say that those are probably the ones that I would most likely say that, like if you had to take 5 card games with you, like on a desert island, like those would probably be some of the ones that I would most associate with. But I mean, like you said, tentacles, like I don't know how many octopuses you have to like stitch to me to have enough octopuses to the tentacles to touch everything. There's some weird Cthulhu magic going on, but ultimately it's close to 30. It's close to 30.
That's considerable. That's quite a lot of tentacles. I don't speak to me after we finish this, and we'll talk about the OnlyFans content that we can produce with that many tentacles. Anyway, so I know that you broadcast because you just mentioned that. Are you a competitive person at all? Do you travel to events? Do you travel to broadcast? Do you travel to play?
Well, as somebody who likes to eat and pay rent, I prefer to broadcast because those are always paying gigs. Those are not always consistent, nor are they stable. It's a very turbulent business. It's, in fact, right now, it's quite a turbulent business. I'm kind of like mired in a lot of turbulence. I guess I'll lean back on that word. I am also a competitive person in the sense that when I play, I want to win, and I always play to win. It's not I don't get. I think what separates me from true competitors and true pros is that I don't get as upset or hung up on losing. Um,
Mhm.
one of the things that I always lean on, like some people might attribute it as my quote unquote catchphrase or whatever, but I always end my podcast with "You're not losing if you're learning," and I truly mean that. If I
Mhm.
lose a game, I want to take something out of it, be it a lesson. Why did I lose? How did my opponent play? What can I take out of it? There's always a lesson to be learned in failure, and I think that if you're taking something out of it, then it's not actually failure. It's improvement. It's progress. So with that in mind, I've done a lot of losing and I've done a lot of progress and improving. So these days, I put a lot of work into improving and playing, which then fuels my competitive fire because I want to go out there and see how good I am. So very recently, I've shifted gears to try to play more aggressively on the tournament scene, on the competitive scene. So it just so happened that budget cuts and things are that they were, I'm not getting hired as much as I used to be
Mhm.
because that's just the nature of the business. So what do I do instead? Well, I put the nose down, and just practice and play because I still want to be amidst the competitive landscape. For me, watching a game and talking through it and watching the brilliance unfold before me is a better experience for me than it is to grind it out and play it and sweat through it. However, I understand that that's not really the case. So I try to get that high and chase that joy by actually competing. And the result of that is I've become a pretty good player in what I've put my mind to. But I'm again, I don't think I lack that killer instinct. I think I lack that killer instinct that a lot of elite players have, where when they lose, they take it to heart. And for me, if I lose, it's just okay, I lost because I'm used to never winning tournaments. But I've won tournaments in the past, and it feels pretty damn good. And I think that I'm at that point right now for the next few months at least that I'm going to hammer down and I'm going to try to win some tournaments.
Love that.
It's enthralling that that you mention how players get hung up on losing and how it's very easy for a person who plays the game professionally because you have something invested. It means a lot more when you've lost because your expected value is based on you winning, right? So when you lose that, it's like you lose something, and it's a perfect segue into me bringing up the one thing that I cannot go a podcast without bringing up, which is
Tentacles.
that yes, aside from that, which is that I was one card away from going to the Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championship. One card away. Uh,
Dude,
I will never
look,
let that go.
no,
That's the loss that I hung up on.
but you don't have to let it go, but you also shouldn't let it define you because everybody has that bad beat story. I had one of those kind of situations just before where it's like somebody pulled a miracle one in like 50 off the top decks to beat me in a particular game, and I was like, well shoot. I don't know if I can swear on this, but either way, well shoot.
Well, shit.
Yeah, there you go. Well shit. And it's like you just move on, but you got to also understand that you got to that point, right? And
For sure.
but it's all perspective because for you, you may feel disappointment in getting to that point, but for 99% of the other populace, they have never even sniffed anything close to what you
Oh,
achieved.
exactly. Exactly.
Oh, that's so good. That reminds me too of something that Itachi knows him, but ridiculous hat in the Hearthstone and Marvel Snap now, I guess, scene. He mentioned this to me one time, but he's like, "You're so stuck in like not feeling like you belong, or like getting hung up on that kind of like, oh, I'm not good enough or I'm not at that spot." He's like, "You're completely forgetting everything it took for you to get to that point." And when he said that to me, it's like, oh, yeah, like that makes total sense. Because I mean, even to get to the point of hitting legend or, like you said, kind of competing at that high level, like you have to be good and you have to understand the basics and you have to put in the work to get to that point in the first place, right? And like,
Mhm.
I think especially with social media and a lot of the kind of instant gratification type of things that we see a lot right now, it's easy for people to not see all of that, right? You
Yeah.
see the, oh wow, this person has so many followers. Oh, this person has been so successful with content or in a tournament and competing, and you're like, yeah, but you didn't see the, all the nights that they stayed up till 2 a.m. practicing their decks, or that they had to, work this job that they absolutely hate to scrape together money for gas and food to go to that tournament
Right.
that they ended up winning, or whatever it is. Like, you don't see all of that all the time.
Well, exactly, because everybody wants to see the finale, and everybody tunes into the World Series, but they're not going to watch the whole season prior to that, right? Like, that's kind of where that gets down to. And like, if you put the work in, you'll get rewarded, and hard work does pay off. That's something I've leaned on for a long time, is do things the right way. It might take longer, but it's more sustainable and it's more stable. It's a sturdier foundation to build upon. It might take longer, but again, for instance, like this tournament I played a week ago or a week and a half ago or so in Minneapolis. There was it was a very difficult, man. One of the games is a very difficult matchup, and somebody who was watching me was like, "Wow, I can't believe that you got out of that." And the reason I got out of it is, I'm like, dude, I put in like 50 hours in the past 2 weeks on, on this, in this matchup, like, just so that when this random situation occurs, I can say that, hey, I've been here before and I know how to handle it. But again, everybody remembers that one top deck that beat them, and I sympathize with you, dude, because it's absolutely soul crushing, because you cannot prepare for a top deck to absolutely just goon you like that, and it just crushes you. But again, it's like a ladder, because somebody who falls off the first rung of the ladder is just going to brush it off, and they won't even feel a thing. The higher you climb, the bigger the fall, and that is a very devastating thing. And not only that, but the longer the fall, and you have a longer time to just feel that pit in your stomach as you're kind of walking back from the table, from the venue to the hotel, to the like, once you get through all that, there's a lot of time for you to just reflect on it and fall into what could eventually become a depression or bad feelings. But that is something that needs to be practiced and worked through, as like the mental aspect of things is not just about what card to play in what scenario. It's also about how to handle the various peripheral garbage that is going to constantly attack you. It's not just the cards that are dealing damage. There's the emotions, the mentality, the mental health aspect. And that is as much of some like a skill set or something, a muscle that you need to work out and make sure that you're resilient in that as well.
For sure. It's a lot about how you handle the aftermath of situations like that. And I think that a lot of times it's like, it could be discouraging for some. I know people who've quit for the same reason, like, oh, I got so close, but I just never got there. But that, for me, that felt like a reason to get there, as opposed to a reason to stop trying, right? It felt like, okay, you can get that high again. And I mean, emotional damage. That's hilarious. So yeah,
I wanted to say it in the voice, but I don't know. Because that whole one clip was my life for like 2 months.
It teeters. So I could try to do I've tried to do the voice, but it gets way too close to racism that I just kind of just stay away from.
I'm like, all right, I can be funny for a day and then get canceled, or cruise right past it.
I'll just hear it in my head. That's it.
I hear it though very clearly. And so about I see that DM Armando was talking about the grind, and I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I'm very anti-grind. I, as opposed to grinding and playing a deck for 75 hours, I would rather study everyone who has picked up the deck. I'd rather watch everyone play who has touched the deck, or who has put out content about the deck, or who has an idea, whether it be a top player or whether it be somebody who's just trying to get a YouTube channel off the ground and like can't win a locals. Like, I want to hear every idea and study. I don't want to physically be, which is why Hearthstone as a game bothers me, because I can't just study Hearthstone, show up to a tournament and do great. The tournament that I just showed up to this past weekend in Kentucky, I put in maybe 4 hours of playing, but I put in dozens of studying other people. And then I showed up and I performed based on the mistakes that I watched other people make in scenarios that I myself ended up in. So I think that's one of the pitfalls that we find in like a digital game, where if you don't grind, then you're just not going to get, it doesn't matter how much studying you do, because there's no open source invitation. I mean, I guess everything's invitation based and not really like, what's the word I'm looking for, where you can just, anyone can apply.
It's like an open format kind of thing.
It's open circuit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we got a little just a little.
Off base.
Sidetracks. But that's
It
good.
was all on topic. It's all card game related.
Sorry.
It's fine.
Tim Armada's in chat and can attest to the fact that he is essentially there. He is like the person who just like he's just like, watch the road, and I was like, oh yeah, okay, hold on. Like whenever we're casting together, he's the person who basically controls the radio and makes sure that I don't fall asleep while we're driving, kind of thing. That's his job.
Well, thank you, DMR,
You two
for
did
keeping
some
things in the road.
Yeah, definitely. You two recently did some casting for Flesh and Blood as well. It was fantastic. The chemistry between you two was just great. Like giveaways and then throwing cards at the camera, like in between games. It was just, there was a lot of fun to be had. So definitely recommend checking that out for anybody listening. Even if you don't even know Flesh and Blood, just go over there, watch the channel, watch the tournament at the casting.
I ate a donut in 22 seconds. It could have been 19, but I was sabotaged and I lost the bet. But it did happen.
It's amazing. Yeah.
So
this is what card games are really about.
Donuts, yes, donuts and tentacles. That's all we've got in this podcast. We are the Donuts and Tentacles podcast. So we will also have links to Flake's socials in the YouTube description. And also the show notes for our audio listeners. And Flake will also plug them at some point later in the show shamelessly, as he's got a voice for radio and a face for TV. So we are ready to see more of what he has got to deliver. As Dawn heads us up with the news. Dawn, back to you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah. So we have some news here. Honestly, I kind of just selected a few games. I'm sure there is more news, but the last several weeks, I feel like we kind of hit the same couple of games, and now there's some things for other games. So let's talk about these couple of things. First thing, and as we go through these, if either of you have anything, like if we want to stop and talk about these, definitely can. If we don't really have anything to say, we'll just move through them quickly. But for Hearthstone, a couple of things here. We mentioned in the previous episode that they had like kind of announced or were coming out with the Battlegrounds new season. But then after that, they also announced and released patch 25.2.2 with some changes, both buffs and nerfs for standard and Battlegrounds. So we have that. Definitely not going to like go through all of those cards because there was a ton of changes. But I feel like the changes were pretty well received for most people, I think. Definitely kind of needed. It was feeling very stale for a lot of people, so I'm glad to see that happen.
I do have a note about kind of the notes that they made in their balance patch. So at the end of Rogue, the developer comment was, we recognize that Rogue has been a little too good for a little too long at higher ranks. The change to Null/Maestra interaction is a major change to the class intended to substantially shake up how it looks in place, while the Sunstone Graveyard change gives opponents more of a chance to respond to the Rogue pop-off turns, which is understandable. The Sunstone Graveyard is along the lines of the other nerfs and also buffs that they would make in a genuine, normal balance patch. But the change to the Null/Maestra interaction is a fundamental change to how they wanted the class and the interaction to work. And that's something that we don't see very often. As opposed to making a deck weaker, they change the entire outlook of what a deck looks like. And so I think that's a good direction to take in terms of design, development, and nerfs. So I just want to recognize that, because we often say the things that they're doing sloppily or not great. But I think this is a good change. I like playing, for instance, I'll say I booted up Hearthstone and I played Swashbuckler on turn 1. And that felt good. I had a rogue card on 1 and I played a rogue card on 1. I didn't wait until Maestra had drawn 4 cards, or until my disguised class had drawn 4 cards. I could play it on 1, and that was cool. It feels like a totally different class. And so kudos to them for making such a good change. I really do appreciate that kind of insight. So I hope that they continue to develop their notes like they've been doing. That's been pretty cool. Yeah. So shout out to Blizzard, Hearthstone's development team.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they kind of really fundamentally changed one of the warrior cards as well, like completely differently. I think a lot of people kind of expected them to just change mana cost, but then instead they're like, hey, instead we're dropping the mana by 3, but then adding a mana thirst effect
Yep.
and doing this. So it kind of did feel like, in a way, that was, I feel like, the first time that they've kind of made those big leaps in changes. They usually kind of have, leaned towards the more kind of conservative, like, nudging of cards.
Yeah.
So yeah, to see them kind of just be like, all right, let's just kind of flip this 180 and see what happens. Really cool there. So I hope we see more of that in the future.
I do believe that, like, I'm pretty sure that card that they flipped in Warrior, it was Last Stand, which is 4 mana, and then they changed it to like the 1 mana with the mana 37. I'm pretty sure that was probably another iteration of the card that they thought might have been different. But they may have felt that it was too strong without having tested and seeing that Rogue was still ridiculous at the time, and that Warrior wouldn't stand a chance. So they brought out the stronger iteration of the card that they may have been reluctant to ship earlier, and just because you don't want to create something ridiculous like they did with Sinstone Graveyard.
Yeah. All right. Well, Hearthstone also, on the kind of community team side of things, they announced the initial information and kind of launched the application part of their creator program, which this is the first time they have done anything like this. They've never had any sort of like creator benefits, and definitely nothing that was even somewhat transparent. Like, everything that they've done to work with creators or creating events was all kind of, maybe you know who's going to be in it, maybe you don't. You have no idea how to even be a part of things. So they released all of that information. There is going to be even more information discussed on the Angry Chicken podcast coming up Tuesday, February 1st at 6 p.m. But we have that article linked for you. You can go to the actual creator, Hearthstone Creator Program website if you want to take a look at that, look at those requirements, or applied. I filled out the application and applied. I don't hit the exact numbers that they have, but also I'm on like multiple platforms, and I think if they look at that combined, I'm hoping that I have a good, a good odds to get in. But if I don't, well, back to the drawing board. We keep on working. But pretty interesting that they finally did release some stuff. I don't know if either of you got a chance to look at that, or if you had some thoughts on it.
I didn't even know they had a creator program, and then, announced it now. I don't think they ever needed one. I think that this is sort of a nice way to sort of say, hey, we just cut a whole bunch of stuff and smoke and mirrors. And I was like, I think that's kind of the angle here.
I agree.
Yeah, it's been in the works for a long time, for the last year, as far as I'm concerned. Like, they kind of announced some stuff summer last year, like, hey, this is something that we're going to be working on and putting out. And then they kind of initially were expecting it to be launching, or initial information coming out, last August. Clearly, we're getting it now in January, so it's, been pushed back a bit. But yeah, I want the information on what they're actually providing creators personally, to see that, because is it just, hey, if you're part of this program, every expansion, you're going to get a bundle code to give away. Okay, that's sure, whatever. But, if it's actually more than that, and, some really cool stuff, if you can actually be part of things and it's actually going to help your growth as a creator, that's what I'm looking for. And I hope that they can do that. So we'll see. But also, in a similar vein, I also saw that MTG Arena also kind of announced a program to become a partnered organizer and run your own events with a pricing support. Looking at it, unless they're going to change things, it did look like currently they only will provide in-game pricing, not actual cash pricing or anything like that. Looks like they specifically are working with Matcherino on that. So if you are somebody who is interested in, running your own tournaments or something for MTG Arena, then check that out. I'm not really sure if that is much better or more interesting for people than the Hearthstone Creator Program. I don't know. But I was very intrigued at the fact that both of these were announced in the last several days. They were both kind of announced at the same time. Interesting.
It's all connected.
That's all right. Bring out your tinfoil hats. Here we go. All right. But in terms of card sets, MTG's next set, Phyrexia All Will Be One, will be releasing in MTG Arena on February 7th and in stores February 10th. They will be having pre-release events from February 3rd through the 9th. So, if you're interested in that, I know we've also talked the last couple episodes about the Eternal set just dropped pretty recently, and then a week ago now today, Pokemon Crown Zenith came out. So now it's MTG's turn for their set. So yep, that is coming out soon. And then we also had Flesh and Blood banned and suspended list was announced, which will be taking effect Monday, January 30th, after the end of the ProQuest Season 3 events this coming weekend. So I would like to hear your thoughts, Flake, on this, since you are much more involved with Flesh and Blood than either of us. So this was that they only included 4 cards, I believe, for
there's
Classic Constructed.
4 cards, 2 outright banned, 2 are suspended until the hero that they're typically most known for using them is sort of wheeled out of relevance until they get elevated and retired to living legend status, which is essentially like rotating that hero out because they're too good. All in all, I'm a little annoyed because it targeted a hero that it was one of those things where it's like, when you buy the jersey of a player you really like and then they get traded the next day, that's kind of how I feel. Like I had literally just told everybody, I'm like, this is it. This hero is my new main and I love it. And it's the hero I put all that work into, like, dozens and dozens of hours of practice. And literally right after that, they're just like, hey, cool story. We see that Flake's having some good success with it, so we're just going to pull the shoot on it, and good luck. And that's kind of how it goes. But, I mean, I think that they're fine. There's the typical, there you go, belittle. Adios, Gonzo. Belittle is gone. That's not the card I was talking. I'm more of the Winter's Wail person. Yeah. That's what bothers me the most. But ultimately, I think that the standard 24 hours of outrage / acceptance has sort of passed. People are just being like, all right, well, we'll figure it out. So the difference is that there's a major tournament happening next weekend, a week after tomorrow, I suppose. And that threw a wrench in my system because I'm going to that and I'm playing in that. And now I have no idea what the hell I'm going to do. So c'est la vie.
Charmer coming through with the comments.
Freaking Charmer.
I know. I was so sad. I bought like right before Christmas. I was trying to get into Flesh and Blood, and I got stuff to build. Not like the most competitive decks, but at least like somewhat competitive. And I got 3 decks. And I was like, cool. I got the Belittle and all this, and then I didn't end up going to a tournament that I was intending to go to last weekend because of a ton of snow. It was like, multiple hour drive away. And I was like, that's not going to happen this weekend. And then it was like, okay, no problem. Like, I can still just practice these and then see how things look for like next month. And then I saw that and I'm like, oh, well, that sucks. Like, I've got to discard one of these decks and now I can't even use it. Great.
Love it.
Yeah. I guess that's one thing I do prefer with the digital card games over the physical is like, well, at least if they adjust it, like I could still have the card. I guess I still have this, but now I'm like, yeah. Right?
Yeah, no dust refund for you.
Physical cards, like, can I mail it back? No.
What's interesting is that this is related yet unrelated. So there's this card called Dark Paladin in Yu-Gi-Oh! It was a fusion of Dark Magician and Buster Blader. 2 very popular cards at the time, and the card got misprinted in the original pack printing. There was an error with the card printing, and so what they did was they offered you could send that card back, and they would send you the corrected version of the same exact card that you sent back. And so few people did that the corrected version became the more rare one, and very few people had copies of it. So just If they ever do
fun.
offer you
Wow.
to mail a card back for for something better, take it.
Just it's free stuff. Well, it's not really free, but just take it anyways.
Take it anyway. Yep.
Right.
So we'll move on to competitive and organized play, which is my forte and my love. Hearthstone Esports for 2023 was canceled with an announcement that noticeably had a huge drop in qualification, the amount of events, the prize pools. That'll all be linked in the show notes. But essentially, what they did was cancel the program, in lack of a better word, unless you make the World Championship, in which case you are poised to make quite a large sum of money in the tune of a $500,000 prize pool. But aside from that, I don't think there's really anything else up for grabs unless you are a Battlegrounds lobby legend, which does have regular events, a little bit more regular events with prize pools. So that is the Hearthstone Esports 2023 announcement that was so anticipated. It left a lot of people disappointed, I believe, myself being one of them. I felt like we received an announcement that was hyped. I know that some people disagree with that. So we received an announcement that was hyped to be something that was great. We got recognition or notification that the ladder for January was going to matter for the next Masters Tour, which technically it does. But it was kind of facetious in the regard that it's not going to be the same kind of system before, where qualifying for a Masters Tour means you have the chance to earn money in that Masters Tour. So the expected value has gone way down, which sucks. So that's the Hearthstone Esports 2023 landscape. So the next thing we've got, or actually, is there anything that you guys had to comment on that? Because I know it was a pretty big point of contention.
A lot of card games are kind of scaling back on big tournaments and things like that. I think that Hearthstone is just, I don't know. I honestly, I'm not as entrenched in Hearthstone competitive sort of culture or whatever, but I mean, from what I see and hear and know about the card games I am involved in, I think that everybody's just throttling back. Yeah, it is what it is.
What's weird is that the newcomers to the scene seem like the ones that are making big and bold pushes. So like Battle Spirit Saga, Disney Lorcana, I think Flesh and Blood as well had pretty big prize pool announcements with a ton of events that are coming up on the horizon. So I don't know if it's the naivety of a new card game being introduced that are creating these situations where it's like, hey, we're going to enter the scene with this very, very huge offering, and we're going to trust that the players will turn out and that they'll play. Whereas the more established card games seem to be the ones that are scaling back and saying, okay, well, we did it and we're not going to do it anymore.
I think like if you want to show up now, you have to show up with at least $1 million in your pocket. Like, I think that there's no other way. If you want to be a competitive card game, like if you're just, trying to sell baseball cards or whatever, I mean, just trading cards, like, you don't need a competitive scene. But if you want people to get hyped about your game, how are you going to attract that side of the player base, the competitive player base, without $1 million prize pool? It's just the reality of it now. It's that, 5-10 years ago, you show up and you say, hey, we got $1 million on the line this year. People would lose their fucking minds. Now it's like, okay, what have you done for me lately? $1 million is fine, but next year, that's the thing. And like Flesh and Blood is jamming out another $1 million this year, but behind the scenes, they're cutting the fuck out of everything. Like, that's the other part of it. It's like coverage gone, production gone. We're axing an entire Pro Tour champion, like an entire Pro Tour. We're going from 2 to 1 Pro Tour championship. That we're doubling the prize pool. So, but like, again, the $1 million is still there. It's just in fewer pockets. So the events are going to be bigger, but the production of it and such, like all the glamour, glitz and glamour of it is gone. And this kind of goes back to also when, I don't know if you guys remember that whole campaign that Magic put out where they're like, hey, do you want to be famous playing cards? And they put out this video campaign of like, do you remember that video where it's like the whole ad was, you come out of like a limo and people are taking your pictures and they're walking you through and they're like, be famous playing, $1 million. And then literally several months later, they're like, all right, so we lost 3/4 of it somehow. We don't know how, but you're not getting it. Anyways, here's another 5 cards that we're selling for $100, or like
Yep.
things like that. It's like kind of didn't make any sense, but I get it from a business standpoint, but it's pretty fucking cutthroat out there right now. And
Yeah.
if you just want to be recognized, $1 million is the price tag for your organized play. But beyond that, that's when they realize that they might understand that it's not feasible, or they just don't want to give up that money. So they'll keep either the price tag of $1 million and cut everything else, or they'll scale back the actual prize money, which is like what Hearthstone's doing, and maintain coverage or do other things. But all in all, I think that the TCG's competitive kind of scope, like people don't understand or realize just how expensive it is to run and how companies really love money. So that's another thing.
Oh yeah, capitalism. That'll teach you. Yeah, it's tough too, and I think I was talking about this on the other podcast that I do. It's like I think the response to the Hearthstone especially was a lot of people said, "Oh, well, that means Hearthstone's dying." I don't think so. I think competitive Hearthstone is kind of dying, and the competitive like broadcasts. But Hearthstone itself, like, is still insanely popular. It's got still a huge following on Twitch, especially compared to other card games on, just view wise on Twitch, right? Like, it still has that. And as a game itself, it is appealing to a very wide audience. It's very accessible, right? People don't have to travel for it. They can just pull out their phone and play. It's pretty easy to get into, like all of that. So I think in terms of the game itself, like, will there be a drop off of players because of the competitive cuts? Maybe. But I think the game itself is still going to be, just as valid, still popular. But, for physical card games, I feel like that's pretty hard to do as well. Like, how do you, say, hey, we're going to have all these tournaments, but now we're going to have less of them and still have like an advertising to get people to buy the cards? Hearthstone, I think, is kind of switching and putting a lot of that into their events and community type stuff, because they're going to spend that money in advertising and bringing people in. Are their tournaments actually getting people to play the game or spend money? Probably not. Right. Or at least nowhere near what they would want, right? But you can't really have the tournaments and like it as an advertisement or a promotional type thing. They're kind of two separate things. And unfortunately, I kind of think that they were trying to make it into one thing in the past. And that's why we've really seen this, scale back. And especially, like Flake was saying, they've kind of had that glamour, right? Even Hearthstone, all these exotic places you could go with these big flashy tournaments. And it was really cool. You could be one of these people who, got this huge like broadcast spotlight on you. And, you got like a whole interview segment about you and really got to showcase who you are. To now it's just like, after COVID, right? Everybody started joking, oh, it's Hearthstone Masters Tour living room. Like, because everything was just online. The only broadcasts were just, people streaming from their dark bedroom or in their kitchen or living room. And after a while, it's like, people don't want to watch that. People lose interest in that because it just kind of feels like the same thing. There's not that huge glamour aspect anymore. It's feeling a little lackluster. So I'm not really surprised to see a lot of these changes, but yeah, it's feeling a little sad. Like sad, but also kind of exciting because of all the new card games that are coming out. So I'm like, I don't know how to feel right now. I feel so like torn. I don't know.
So 2 things that I've noticed. One, what the whole flesh and blood thing. I don't know if you've ever heard of or watched the documentary Pepsi, Where's My Jet?
Yes. Yes.
Dude, that is a striking reminder.
I was following that shit when it was live, like when it was going on the news, man. I remember that stuff. I remember seeing that commercial like on TV when I was younger. Oh my God. Yeah, that's an awesome documentary.
So there's that. If you haven't watched it, watch Pepsi Where's My Jet is hilarious. The second thing is, one of the things that I think that card games have realized is that the games that were always meant for casual players have still continued to appeal to casual players, but we, being competitive players, have gained an audience of people who are also competitive players. So from our lens that we've created, everyone's dropping out of the game, everyone's quitting, everyone's not playing. But as competitive players, and that being our following and followage, that is a small representation of the people that are actually playing the game, and an even smaller representation of people who are paying to play the game. I hardly pay for anything in Hearthstone because between the amount that I play, I usually get enough gold and I have enough dust accumulated to get everything. Similarly, in other games, the way that the game works is if you play the game more and at a higher level, you gain more in-game currency to do things with. So you're the person who spends the least money and gets the most benefit from any given game. And you also benefit the most from the competitive landscape, whereas the competitive player doesn't benefit at all. I mean, the casual player doesn't benefit at all from that. They benefit from the fun offerings and like the cosmetics. They're the ones that are the target market for that. They're the target audience for like bundle deals, in-shop deals, things like that. Those are the people who are spending that money. The people who aren't playing enough to get all of the cards, but are playing enough to enjoy the game. That is not me. I'm not gonna lie to you. I love the game Hearthstone, and I play enough to get all the cards at any given time, with maybe like one bundle purchased per expansion. With it being the welcome bundle, basically because it's really good value or because it's like an incentive for. But in any case, I just realized that like I'm not that target audience for Hearthstone. It's a very fun card game. It's very random, and it's very beautifully designed. And in order to keep that beautiful design, it costs money. Very well aware of that. So they can't keep shelling out millions of dollars for large scale tournaments for people who are watching the game in small numbers, as you see in like the YouTube broadcast average, like 3,000 to 4,000 people, when we're not the ones bringing in the money. So I digress to say that that's kind of the landscape that a lot of card games are realizing. But I think the card games that are made for competitive players are going to be larger cash sinks than they might initially appear to be. Because in order for them to continue making money off of competitive players, you have to continue offering something that you cannot gain by simply playing the game.
Now, to play devil's advocate, Blizzard also latched on real hard to YouTube's teeth to suck all that money out of them to transfer their competitive broadcast from Twitch to there, and saw their numbers tank. They chased the money. They were upwards of, I don't know how many tens to hundreds of thousands of people watching their stuff before, but they went to YouTube, and when YouTube was fresh into the live streaming kind of business, like I don't know how many of you have Mixer accounts, but like that's kind of what the situation was, right? So I have absolutely no sympathy for a company like Blizzard that has so much fucking money that, but at the same time, I also understand from the perspective of good business that, you know, do you really want to dish out $5 million a year to make the community happy? Or would you rather use that money to, I don't know, put in your own pocket, so to speak? Like, I'm not saying that's exactly it or whatever, but $1 million prize pool is not the whole picture. There's all the logistics and stuff that you have to pay for to put this stuff on. That is probably 3 to 4 times the cost of the actual prize money. Like, it's huge. What I like what you said about the competitive versus casual stuff, because for the competitive people who see this happen, they're like, okay, it's clearly dying. Hearthstone is dying. It's dying. It's dying. It's dying. It's dying. I've been around so many card games. Gwent was one of them. I've been hearing that Gwent is dying since 2018. Now, is it actually dying? Yes, because they've actually announced that as of 2024, they're not doing anything else with the game. But that said, I worry about games like Flesh and Blood that doesn't have a casual culture. So all they have is competitive. That's the reality. There's no people playing around or very few people rather, playing around the kitchen table trying to do unique things. Thank God for people like DM Armada, Red Zone Rogue, and whatnot, who really cobbled together unique and interesting decks for people to get enticed by the casual aspect. But let's be real. There's without a streaming platform for it, without an actual casual outlet for people to do stuff, it's a physical only card game. It's not easy to go, like you mentioned, like you accumulate enough in-game resources to design stuff and try new things in Hearthstone because you put in the time. You can't do that with Flesh and Blood. Dude, if I play 1 million hours of Flesh and Blood, I get nothing. They don't give me a gold. I can't dust my cards. It's not whatever. And there's no easy to play official digital platform for me to do it. All they have is competitive. And that's what worries me about Flesh and Blood and the future of Flesh and Blood is that they're already axing a lot of that. They're already pulling the chute on a lot of that. And they don't have a casual player base to fall back on. So if they turn their back on the competitive culture, they've basically shot themselves in the foot. And I worry greatly of it. I have a sincere concern, and not just from a selfish perspective because I'm a caster for their major tournaments, but it scares the living shit out of me that they're willing to bite the hand that feeds in that sense because they don't have a left hand, you know, they don't have another hand that's going to feed them. That's the problem. But the Hearthstone aspect makes sense because you as a competitor, you see it and you're like, yeah, fuck that. No more competitive culture. The game's dying. Meanwhile, you don't see the 99% behind you who are being like, fuck yeah, discover dragons and do this and play 80 cards at once and, you know, that kind of stuff, which is perfectly fine and fair. And that's the thing that bothers me about the game, because as somebody who prefers reliability and not necessarily predictability, but some sort of streamlined thing to a game. That's why I like old school Hearthstone was so good to me, because there was no discover mechanic. There was no playing around a magical card that you didn't even conceive of. There was none of that. But now I don't like Hearthstone from a competitive standpoint. I still play it occasionally. I don't like it from the competitive standpoint because it doesn't appeal to me. But I also understand that Blizzard's like, who cares? We have millions of people who are buying bundles and cosmetics because that's precisely what they want to do.
It's a Timmy game. Hearthstone is a Timmy game, and Flesh and Blood is a Johnny game.
Yes, that's absolutely. No, you're spot on. And the problem is that, you know, Timmies are going to give a lot of money, and all the spikes that are playing Flesh and Blood are only giving up so much money. And if you show them the curb, you're in for a rude awakening, and that's a dangerous thing.
Yep. So interesting things on the horizon for competitive esports, and so it'll be interesting to see where the landscape goes and who sticks with what they promised and who keeps it and who bolsters it and then who pulls back. So speaking of a TCG/VGC who's doing great, Pokemon Orlando Regionals will be happening February 4th and 5th. That is next weekend, I believe, correct? Yes. And then they will also have a Knoxville Regionals, which we'll talk about in future podcasts. That'll be coming up soon. I'll be attending that most likely, playing the TCG, which I've just learned how to play. But I've got the best deck, so we'll see what happens. Pokemon TCG being such an extremely large franchise, obviously one of the world's largest. The decks, I've noticed, I've got a tier 1 deck from my bulk. And I don't have a lot of Pokemon bulk. I have maybe like a couple boxes. It's like $40 for tier 1 deck, $40. So
that's awesome though. That's incredible.
That's what's great, because the expensive stuff in Pokemon is the stuff that's going to be collectible. Your Umbreon, V-Star Umbreon, that's, you know, secret rare alternate art. That's a collectible. That's the expensive card. The VMAX Mew that you need to play in a tier 1 Genesect Mew deck is like $20 or $10. So it's a little bit different the way that they built that landscape, but also they're doing TCG, VGC, and Pokemon Go. So those are all those things happening at once. One big event makes it kind of a convention, a Pokemon convention of sorts. If you're a vendor, if you're a person who collects, if you're anything involved in Pokemon, then their event is something that you would go to regardless of whether or not you play any of these games. And I think that is something that is very exclusive to Pokemon because of the scope of the franchise, and something that I think a game like Disney Lorcana could potentially compound on if they choose to go such a route.
Oh, Lorcana is going to absolutely, I don't want to say smother Pokemon, but it has everything it needs to say, okay, cool story, bro. Here's Disney. It's the same, I think it's going to be the same kind of appeal, because like you mentioned, hey, I'm going there, I'm going to play, I got a tier 1 deck, I know the matchups, I know this, I studied, I played, and whatever, I'm going to go there and I'm going to wreck face. But then there's also going to be dozens of kids who are going to collect the cards because they want the shiny, you know, I don't know names of all the Pokemon now. Because,
Cruella.
Yeah, but like the Lorcana, but it's the same exact thing. I just recorded my first episode of my new podcast, which is going to be about Lorcana, and we were digging into it, and we were discussing a little bit about what the appeal is going to be and who the target market is, and we're like, everyone, like just nuclear bomb the entire thing. Like this isn't like we're trying to snipe this or snipe that. It's just, okay, let's just carpet bomb the entire market because everybody's going to find something they like here. That's really awesome. Also, real quick, do not fawn over Tan and Grace. That's not allowed while I'm around. That is not allowed. As somebody who has known him for a little while now and speaks with him regularly, just do not do that. Do not. It's like throwing water on a gremlin. You do not do that.
Duly noted. Will not interact with Tan and Grace at all. Oh my God, Tan and Grace is in chat.
Okay, so it's okay to feed him after midnight, though, right? Like throwing water, no, but I can feed him after midnight.
That's correct. Yeah, no, you can absolutely do that. For the record, though, Tan and Grace is a professional and a wonderful person and a good friend of mine. So that's off the record, but on the record.
Well, that's wonderful. Glad to see you, Tannen. Great to have you in chat, as well as you, Charmer, and anyone else that has joined the chat, DM Armada. You guys are all great. So the next bit of news we've got in terms of competitive play is YCS Yu-Gi-Oh! Championship Las Vegas, February 18th and 19th. That's in a couple weeks. Las Vegas being one of my favorite American cities to go to. I definitely was going to go to YCS Las Vegas. It is currently kind of still up in the air. May go if something just randomly pops up that makes me feel super hype about going, but it is a team YCS. It is a 3v3. I don't like putting my fate in a tournament in the hands of two other people. So there's a little bit of, and then also have to depend on two other people to get from wherever they are to Las Vegas. So that is, that's a little bit weird.
And show up like the next day, right? Like get there and then survive a night in Vegas.
Also survive Friday night in Las Vegas. So next bit of information is Battle Spirit Saga, and they announced launch events March 24th. It says 24th through 16th. I mean, I think it meant 16th through 24th or 24th through 26th.
I just fat fingered. Sorry.
It's a weekend. Improv comedy is great. March 24th through 26th in Las Vegas, London, Melbourne, Australia, and a to-be-decided location in Latin America. We're going to say it's in Brazil. With $350,000 prize pools and on-site pickup for product with more details still to come.
How crazy is that? Like off of what we're talking about, of how like the price of entry to having an OP is $1 million. Here, there, I'd be like, 350,000. Let's just start off with that.
I mean,
yeah, that's not even counting the $1 million that they said for their actual competitive year. Like this is separate from their $1 million. So it's like, okay, well, how long is that going to last? We'll see. I don't know.
Who's funding this? Mark Zuckerberg? This has got to be someone rich is doing this. But I'm not opposed. If you can go and be great at the game, go get your money while it's still available. That tree will dry up at some point. Hopefully not, though, because I love seeing competitive games flourish. And I think the last bit of... also one thing that we had in the news that I skipped over was that the Yu-Gi-Oh! Photon Hypernova set releases on February 9th, with pre-release events happening next weekend. That will be February 4th and 5th. So that'll be next weekend. And then the following week, the set will officially release. It's due to usher in a brand new, what's supposed to be tier 1 deck. We will see how that goes. So for me, I've got a little bit of a tournament result from this past weekend. I traveled to Louisville, Kentucky with my beautiful wife and two of my good friends to play in a Yu-Gi-Oh! Regional event. I had very little practice. I had very little time. I did fairly well in the event. I went 6-2. We thought we were going to play a 7-round event. And so I was like 5-1 or something like that. And I was like, I just got to win one more. And then the judge was like, I'm sorry, guys. Before you start this round, there's another one because I looked at the wrong numbers. So I was like, okay, just got to win 2 more. So I won both. I got my invite to the national championship for Yu-Gi-Oh! So that's great. That'll be sometime this summer. The guy that I traveled with, his name's Fred, one of my best friends. He placed 9th. I placed 13th. So we both placed in the top 16. So that's pretty awesome. Playing totally different decks. One of the things that's interesting about me and his friend dynamic is that I play the tier 1 deck and he plays the deck that absurdly beats it. So when we practice together, I get stomped and I like to the brink of like tears, and I'm like, I don't want to play this deck. This thing is crap, and I'm never gonna win with this. And then I go play it, and then I do great. And so spare the tournament results in terms of round by round, just to say that when I walked into the room, I said that the only 2 things that could beat me is Chris LeBlanc, who will definitely probably be our world champion, He's one of the greatest players of all time. I said the only people that can beat me is Chris LeBlanc and my own deck, and those are the two things that I lost to. I lost to Chris LeBlanc. We were both undefeated, and then in the later round, I lost to my own deck, drawing a hand that I could not play, and then the rest of them were not even close. That was my experience there. So I appreciate the support. And Don throwing that in the show notes and let me ramble on a little bit about my winning. So that was a fun experience.
Okay. No, we need to address this, sir. Okay. You have known me for how many years? You know I hype the hell out of people, especially when they have results like this. And you just so casually like throw some of this around. You're like, yeah, I just went 6-2. Like, no big deal. Like, that's freaking amazing. I love it. When you put your mind to it, you show up, you get there. And I don't care. That dream hack Anaheim in 2020 when you ended up taking fourth, you beat Muzzy on stream and everything. I was there cheering. I don't care. Everybody else just like casually clapping, like, okay. And I'm there, woo! Like, I don't care.
It's always
like, I hype my people, you know?
You do. You definitely do. You always, every time you're always hyping. So I always appreciate the support. I'm a person who likes to push myself farther. So I'm like 8-0 or bust, and then 6-2 is great, but like I'm an undefeated kind of guy. But putting my full focus into Yu-Gi-Oh, getting out of Hearthstone, getting out of Marvel Snap, getting out of Pokemon for the most part, it's proven to be interesting in the amount of time that I would use to consume those other pieces of media, like playing those other games. I've studied Yu-Gi-Oh instead, and it's completely changed a lot of the ways that I play and a lot of the mistakes that I think I might make if I were a little bit less practiced. So I got to see firsthand people make mistakes that I had never physically encountered because I haven't practiced much, but just because studying other people, I saw them make mistakes that I would have probably made myself if I weren't as knowledgeable. So it's interesting when you can observe the game from, especially if you've casted the game or if you've coached the game. I think you observe it from a different level, because you have to now, especially coaching, you have to be able to explain the game to someone who doesn't know the inherent things that your brain has put in the back of itself, where it's so ingrained in your mentality that you don't even think that it needs to be taught anymore. So that's just one of the observable things for me.
Either of you have any kind of closing thoughts on anything for organized play?
Put more money into it. Everyone.
May the odds be ever in your favor, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Like that's basically it.
Well, it's not as if we haven't jumped into this throughout the whole podcast, but the roundtable topic of the week is the age of the card game content creator. With Magic the Gathering Arena and also Hearthstone launching content creator specific pages and links to register for their various programs, how has content creation changed the ways that players interact with their favorite games? It seems like studios and developers are working more closely with creators. They're doing like special events, they're doing invites, they're doing incentives, they're giving you stuff to give away. How much further do you think this trend will continue? Flake, I'll let you, being a creator of multiple games, a broadcaster, a person who's enthralled in the community of a lot of different games, what do you think in terms of how content creation in the age of social media has changed the ways that players interact with these games?
I think that from the perspective of like what the content creation, what the impact is, would be, I don't want to call, the way that I've sort of described card game communities is that there's a vast majority of people who don't have the time to innovate, don't have the time to study necessarily, they rely on other people to do the work for them, and that's perfectly fine. In the same vein that, like, when I go through a drive-through on the way home, it's because, dude, I just don't have time to make dinner tonight or whatever. I got a bunch of other stuff going. That's the shortcut I've taken. I could go home and make a burger and do whatever. It's going to take so long, and it's probably not going to be as good. I'd rather rely on just whoever else to do it. I think that there's a finite amount of people with the time, the innovation, the motivation to do these kinds of things, that it's almost necessary. It's kind of like having it's like sending in your body double to get its ass kicked, so that when you see all the moves, you're like, okay, I know precisely what to do. I'm not going to make all these mistakes, and you're good. That's kind of what it's like. I think that it's an important element to the world, but I think that the impact of content creation is quite drastic on the companies and the games that these content creators are making their content for. Let's be real. The rise of YouTube and Twitch has basically told a lot of these companies that they just don't have to spend that much money on marketing anymore, because everyone's going to do it for them. And it's not like these people are getting uber rich. It's not happening. There might be a few, like in the same vein that if your career path is to be rich playing baseball, let's say, you have the same amount of chance getting rich doing YouTube. You know, you can put the work in, you might be good enough, but if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But there's a real tiny, slim, astronomical chance you'll actually bust through. The difference here is that if you're picturing the New York Yankees organization versus that one player who goes through, that one player might be the content creator. They don't give a shit whether you succeed or not. They just know that you're trying like hell to get their attention and to succeed on their behalf. That's the relationship here. I hate to sort of pull the veil back here, but for the most part, a lot of these companies do not give two flying fucks about content creators, as long as they're as long as they're kind of just making the money and not taking money away from them. That's the thing, because as long as you're out there putting out videos, promoting games for them, doing all this stuff, they'll be happy. They'll play nice. They'll be good. But the second you do something that they don't like, you're gone. It's like cut the ties, forget it, you're gone. And they hold all the leverage, unfortunately, and that's just the way it goes. It's very rare that a content creator can have the same kind of strong arm on a company, or have any kind of strong arm on a company. You know, no matter what their following is. You can have 100,000 viewers on Twitch. You can have 1 million followers on Twitter. That's probably going to be a dent in the side of that tank that they're driving, right? I think content creators are important because they are the ones that essentially drive the culture of any particular game. But there's this fascinating thing amongst the content creation landscape that content creators think that, a lot of them do think that they're bigger than the game, or they think that that they are the game, or they are the product. That's not the case, because and the number one sort of exhibit A of this is, let's say you know, you have 1,000 concurrent viewers on Twitch playing Hearthstone. What happens when you switch to another game because you're just sick of Hearthstone? You're down to like 120, because nobody gives, because there's a 90% of the people didn't care about you. They cared about the game you were playing. So it's this odd kind of, it's not a symbiotic relationship. It's like dual parasitic to a degree, where each of them are kind of leeching off each other. And the second that one doesn't like the flavor, both of them are gonna kind of feel the effects. But it's usually the smaller of the two that are gonna perish and die, because someone else is gonna try to latch on and suckle at that teat. Yeah, and that's the second teeth reference I make on this podcast. Anyways, I hope that this kind of makes sense to you. I don't mean to sort of, I came on this podcast because I wanted to be candid and honest, and that's who I am. That's just what I am. And that's the reality of it, because I've been in content creation space full time for 3-4 years now. I ain't rich. I don't know when my next paycheck's going to be, and that's the danger of it. It's incredibly scary, because you are constantly at the beck and call of companies that are going to hire you, but you don't have any guarantees, and that's the danger of it. But in the meantime, here we are busting out absolute gold of content on their behalf that they didn't have to pay for, but does nothing but market and promote everyone else's games. It's such an odd relationship. It's so odd. And all they're going to do, like, they might send you a box of cards in the mail and say, hey, or give you a spoiler card, and you feel like a god in that case. But that costs them nothing. it's a JPEG in the email. Like that's all it is. And it's a fascinating space, but it's the scary reality of this business that you are so expendable, but you don't think you are. That's
Right.
That's scary.
It's so the three criteria to being a great streamer is you have to be one of the three or two of the three. You have to be funny, or interesting. You have to be skilled, or you have to be paid to be streaming a game as a content creator. So like Disguised Toast is interesting as a person. He's funny. It doesn't matter what game Disguised Toast streams, people are going to watch for him. So the game is little to no importance in terms of his stream. Dog does not stream a game unless he is skilled at it. He won't stream a game until he feels like he's good enough to perform at a high level. So people watch him because he is skilled. And everyone in between does the game because they're either paid or trying to get paid. And it's such a weird. So I've been watching this show called Mr. Robot. I don't know if anybody's ever seen it before.
That's Remy Malek.
Yes.
Yeah.
So me and my wife have been watching that show, and I just like the parallels between the way that the overarching corporation that they're trying to take down in the show treats people, and the way that these large gaming corporations treat people who are just either doing their own thing and just like to play video games and are streaming it online, or they're trying to be noticed. They want that spoiler card. They want that deity status for a day or so to be like, oh yeah, I was the one who revealed Patches the Pirate, whatever. It's like you do so much to get so little. And I think that's really sad. And in terms of the way that it changes how people interact with their favorite games, I think it makes the interaction with everyone else more favorable. You get to watch an awesome personality. You get to watch the high-skilled player that you would never get to see. I remember back in the Yu-Gi-Oh days, obviously Yu-Gi-Oh was only a tabletop game at the time. If you got to travel to a large event and you saw one of the legends of the game play, Adam Korn, Jerry Wang, Lazaro Bolito, these people, I mean, you guys don't know these names, but whatever. If you got to watch one of these people play, it was gold to see those interactions. There's stories that are on forum boards now from back when they played because it was so legendary. But now you get to see whoever the highest, you get to see everything. You get to watch Dog play. You get to watch Bunny Hopper get on. You get to watch, you can go subscribe to Nathan Sawyer and he can teach you how to play the game one-on-one. It knows no bounds as to what your access is to a game and what your access is to the top level players at that game. There's no mysticism or anything like that around it anymore. And that's I think that kind of takes away from in my perspective, it takes away from the allure of a game or the allure of an event where, oh man, I want to go see Brian Kibler and Patrick Chafin play. Well, now I can just go to twitch.com or twitch.tv and watch both of those players. So I just think that it's favorable for everyone except the content creator. It's favorable for the people who are consuming, and it's favorable for the people who are getting the free advertisement from all these streamers or very minimally paid advertisement from all these streamers.
Well, that's where it kind of comes back to, is the fact that you've got the three different groups. You've got the developer, the game creator, the company. You've got the content creator making the content, doing the marketing and putting out content, and you have the people who are consuming it. And the one who loses out here, typically for the most part, is the content creator. When people ask me about getting into content creation and streaming or podcasting or whatnot, I say, yeah, I'm like, I enjoy it. I love it. I quit my day job to focus on it. I also tell them, I said, I did not see a dime until I had about 2,000 hours of content created. I said, so are you prepared to work 2,000 hours for free? And they're like, pardon me? I said, yeah. I said, I did the math. I said, I streamed X amount of hours every day for X amount of, months or years. I said, I put out X amount of YouTube videos. I said, this is just content that you can watch. It has nothing to do with the editing, the preamble, the postamble.
Yeah.
Is that even a word, postamble?
It is.
Perfect. It's the first time I ever used that. It's a podcast first here. But that's the one thing that people don't realize. So when I do get a paycheck for an event and people find out how much that paycheck is, they're like, God damn, what are you, a celebrity? And I'm like, no. I said, this is the payoff for the 2,000 hours that I got to do nothing, or I got nothing for what I did. And I still feel underpaid. and I still feel like I'm getting the shaft, but that's the reality of it. Passion has to be a driving force here, but for content creators, they're stuck behind being supported by the community and having to bend the knee to the company that makes the game. They can't, because the second that they turn on one of the two, then they're screwed. There's no more awkward position to be than being a content creator for a game where the game makes a negative decision and you have the community revolting against it, and you still have to, toe the line to a degree.
Yeah.
You kind of want to be there to shit all over that decision, but you can't because you don't want to sully your relationship with them. It is incredibly difficult to balance, and that that leads to stress, anxiety, depression, all kinds of other things that are equally as devastating as it is to just not get paid. Like, those are more detrimental in the long run.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's in a way like, because I've also been doing this for several years, the last just over 2 years full time. And yeah, it feels essentially like you are still in a way working for a company, or sometimes kind of multiple companies, right? If you're trying to cater to a couple different games or sponsorships, like you have to follow their rules, and like you said, kind of toe the line for all those companies, all the different sponsorships you might do. Be careful what you say on podcasts, on live streams and videos, whatever like that, like, because you never know who's going to be watching who. Now, if you said something in one video that might not even be related, now this company might not want to work with you or reach out. And so it still feels like you're working for a company or those companies, but you're doing it on a freelancer's like ridiculous always on hours. Like, you never clock out. You're never off the clock. And you do it for like no money.
Well,
and
that's it.
A lot of you have to, like, it's ridiculous.
It's worse because you don't get a paycheck. Like, if it was a company, if I was working for, let's say, Blizzard or whatever, then I would actually be getting a steady paycheck, and I'd feel a little bit better about saying, okay, the nerfs sucked, but whatever. Like, cash my check, we're good. I don't care. But I can't. That's the problem. Like, I'm currently involved in negotiating for casting future events, and it's like, at a certain degree, I want to say some shit, but I can't, because I can't jeopardize, that position. I'm not saying that everything I want to say is negative. I've been treated very well by almost every single company that I've worked for, but at the same time, they also understand that, like, I am one of 1,000, and they don't care whether I'm Flake, Jake, Fluke, Flack, whatever. They'll just pick a name and say, go for it. And he didn't accept this money, but fuck it, this guy will. So who cares? It's all the same to us. And that's the thing, and that's the danger, because it's in a Thanos snap, you can just see everything just disappear because you stood on your laurels, or you tried to show a little integrity, and they're just like, well, but I can save $1,000. It's like, okay, that's the worth. Then that's the loyalty, right? Like, that's where it goes. And that's what you have to understand, is that the loyalty that you think is two ways, not all the time.
For my day job, I am an executive of one of the world's largest retailers. And one of the things that, as I quote unquote rose through the ranks of retail, I started off as like a stock boy in my teens. I used to think that retail employees, aside from like executives and higher ups and headquarters, were put in the most horrible position that a person could be put in at a place of employment, right? Because as the retailer has it, the customer or the guest is always right. And as the guest has it, I am always right. So it doesn't matter. And they're actually, statistically, and you can look this up, there is not a more wrong subset of people than people who shop. There is not a single subset of people who are wrong more often than people who are shopping at a retail corporation. But you have to pretend, right? Like, you have to pretend like they're not. But like, to your point, you get a paycheck for that. I'm going to go tell, this cashier that, hey, yeah, give that lady that bread for 2 pennies because she thinks she has a coupon. It is expired. I understand. It's stupid. I understand. Give it to her. And they go, well, crap, I don't get free stuff like that. But at the end of the day, they're going to make whatever agreed upon wage that they are consistently making per hour. As a caster, as a content creator, you might have worked, like you said, 2,000 hours for free, and you might be getting paid. If you get a handsome paycheck, take your total hours invested divided by the amount that you've gotten paid, and you've still worked for probably minimum wage or something similar, right?
Sometimes even less,
or
like
less,
sometimes
like
pennies.
You probably worked for non-tipped server wage, like genuinely, and that sucks. And I honestly, I'm not going to act like I had this perspective. I had the same perspective, but I had not assembled it in this way to the point where I understood the plight of a content creator, where I understood the position of a content creator. I really had not. I got that the job sucked, but here I was and am still wanting to do it right. It's literally just the passion beyond the money. It's why I play Yu-Gi-Oh! There's no cash prizes in Yu-Gi-Oh! Not at all. There's not a single cash prize involved in Yu-Gi-Oh! Everything's either electronic, or it's cards, or it's playmats, or it's whatever. The stuff is expensive if you sell it, but then you got to sell it, right?
Yeah.
So like, it's not like MTG where they're going to say, all right, here's $750,000. Not happening. So yeah, it's a situation and a conundrum that I don't know what the way out of is, because who doesn't dream of being popular and having thousands of viewers on Twitch or YouTube or wherever your streaming platform of choice is? Who doesn't dream of having, the million Twitter followers or whatever? Everyone does. Especially if you feel like you're already invested in the game. What difference does creating an audience make? Well, now you've created the audience and you're giving free advertisement to Blizzard or Wizards of the Coast or whomever. And now you feel like you want to be compensated because you put so much time in. And then you realize what situation you've gotten yourself stuck into.
That's part of it. Like, a lot of it is just, when I started out on this journey, I wasn't thinking that I was going to get rich tomorrow or get rich whatever. I was thinking, I'm like, hey, maybe in a few years I could pay my rent. And that's still the dream. And, over the course of X amount of years, I've broadcast or been on the broadcast team for, dozens of premier events with cash prizes of $50,000 or more, broadcast to thousands of people. Like, I'm very happy with my resume and all this stuff, but at the same time, that means jack shit to the people who are hiring you. They'll ask you because you have a resume and whatever. But the second that you're like, hey, can I get what I'm worth? And they'll be like, no, that's a big fat no there, bucko. Like, that's kind of how they kind of approach it. And it's unfortunate. But again, this all circles back to the fact that you are an asset for them. And the second that you become less of an asset or cost them more than they're willing to give up, they will cut that cord. It's no big deal. And that's the thing, because he said everybody is lining up to be that million follower person. Everybody wants to be the shortstop for the New York Yankees, but there's only one that's going to get it, and in the meantime, other people are going to undercut you because they see the lure of that apple, and and to them it's like, well, this money means nothing. I just want to get my face on like SCG Con's webpage or something.
Yeah.
They don't think of the consequences. They don't think of anything else. They just want to snake their way in and do that kind of stuff. And it is part of the business, and it's the reality of it, and the consequences of it are what it is.
Mm-hmm.
But you'd think, okay, but like, you are who you are. You have all this experience. You have all this stuff. The company knows you. The company doesn't give a shit. The company's like, this guy will do it for free. Fuck it. Like, that's the option. That's clearly the option. Like, Again, comes back to that. And I don't want to be doom and gloom on this, because I love what I do. Like you said, why do you do it? It's not for the money. It's for the passion. And that's why I do it. It just so happened that there was money attached to it. And if I was going to make this a career, I would have to focus on it fully, which I've done. And I've paid my rent every month for the past 3 years doing what I'm doing. And I'm grateful for it. But at the same time, I'm not going on vacations. I drive a 2006 Corolla. I haven't bought new shoes in 10 years, things like that. And my cupboard is full of coffee and ramen. So that's where we're at, like the glamour is not there. And what could change to help this out? Loyalty from trust from companies to say, you know what, I'd rather this extra $5,000 go to the broadcast or the production versus in our pocket. And sometimes that's legitimately the difference. It's a few $1,000s to a multi-million-dollar corporation, and you're not even worth that. And that's when the light bulb goes on and realizes, like, I'm on an island on this, because if I'm on an island and the company's in that boat cruising by, if they'll add, do you have to go to the bathroom? And if I say yes, they'll be like, fuck you, and they'll just go, and they don't care. The first little inconvenience, and they'll just strand you. It's unfortunate, but it's true.
So
I don't even know what the show notes are. I just going on.
Doesn't matter. Does not matter.
I don't know what we're talking about. But you want real shit? That's what we're bringing to the table. You're probably gonna have to bleep the hell out of this, but it's okay.
Yes.
Who needs a bleep? To kind of close the topic on a brighter or darker note, if someone does want to do content, what advice do we have? What do you look for? What do you ask for? How do you value yourself? And try to get something meaningful out of it. Maybe not rich, but meaningful.
Yeah, and that's the important part, is that people are chasing the wrong thing. When you want to get into content creation, you have to understand what you're getting into it for. Are you getting into it because you just want to be famous and you want clicks and crap like that? You could do that. You can go start a YouTube channel, and in a month, you can get a whole bunch of views because all you've done is put clickbait and ruffled feathers and created controversy and drama. And that's the flash in the pan, but it's not sustainable. I would say that if you want to get into content creation, you have to have the passion for it, to understand that it is a lot of work. It's a lot of dedication for a very slow grind process.
Mm-hmm.
But here I am after starting this journey from maybe 6 years ago to where I am today. And I love what I do. I do. And I left a job where I was going to be making six figures to do this, because I woke up every morning with that job with a full bank account and wanting to fucking kill myself every day because I hated it. And this is all I wanted to do. And I worked my ass off. I created enough cushion where I'm like, if needed, I can pay my rent for a whole year before I have to worry about it. And I busted my ass. And I eventually saw the payoff. And the payoff to me wasn't necessarily a paycheck. It was just getting opportunities, getting to collaborate with people, doing things the right way. I highly recommend trying it, because the most people see what I said earlier, which is the 2,000 hours of no pay. But those 2,000 hours it wasn't torture. I was streaming games.
Fun.
I was creating. Exactly. And that's what people have to understand, is that if you can't get past that, then you don't want to do it, because you're not enjoying yourself.
Yep.
So you have to digest the fact that doing it for free is almost as rewarding as doing it for a paycheck. Obviously, give me money all day long. You need that shit to pay my rent. But that 2,000 hours, I was doing it because I wanted to do it. And if you can't reconcile that, then you shouldn't be in this business.
Yeah.
That's the main first hurdle that everyone trips over, is that first thing, because people always have the grandiose dream of being a YouTuber or a Twitch streamer, collecting donations and subscriptions and getting absolutely loaded. But that's not the reality for 99.5% of Twitch streamers. And it's probably not going to be the reality for you. It's not the reality for me, but I do it because I love it. And if you love something, you should give it every fucking thing you have. And if it doesn't work out, the worst case scenario is you did something you love for a lot of time, and that's a pretty full life.
Yep.
Yeah,
100%.
100%. I think from my perspective too, on that same journey of trying to do this for so long, one thing that I feel like I learned almost too late that I've really been focusing on the last year and a half is learning, right? Like even with content, you have to still like continuously be learning, learning a new editing style, learn about lighting to make your freaking camera look better, right? Like learn some audio stuff to make you sound better.
I will not be
You
called
don't
out.
have to, yeah, like you don't have to have the most fancy, most expensive microphone and lighting and camera. Like you don't. Buying the cheapest piece of crap, probably not the greatest thing either, but you know, doing a little bit of research and learning, hey, if your camera looks kind of bad, but your audio sounds really good, people stick around more. If your camera looks fantastic, but you sound like crap, people are out of there. Like people are going to leave. They don't care if your camera looks good, but if you're cutting out, if they hear your mouse clicking every second and they hear every little sound, all they hear is your computer fan over your voice, like they don't no one's going to listen to that, especially if it's in audio only format. They're not going to listen to that. So
Yeah.
one thing that like I've been doing is like really like constantly learning, watching other streamers, watching stuff on YouTube about content creation. Like I wish that I had started doing that earlier, even if I didn't really understand it, but I wish I had just started that process of learning some of that, and even like learning how to do a oh gosh, now I can't think of the word.
Drugs? No, joking.
Handstand.
No.
I was about to say, yeah, somersault.
Yeah, perfect. I might get some more viewers if I tried to do that. When you're getting paid for something, you need to send somebody a freaking form. Like, why am I drawing?
Bookkeeping,
Like,
taxes,
Theft. Money laundering.
invoicing.
Racketeering.
Oh god,
Organized
this
crime.
has turned into a whole thing.
Racketeering is a
Why
crime,
could I not
Dawn.
think of the word?
Genocide?
Definitely
I don't know where you're
not.
going, man. I'm running out of
Oh my-
runway here.
I know what she should. Tentacles.
Invoice,
That's-
an invoice. Why could I not think of the word invoice?
I
Oh my
Because you're
gosh.
too busy
Okay.
thinking about genocide, okay? Psycho.
But like just things like that. Like I in a corporate job or whatever, working retail, you didn't have to know how to do an invoice. You didn't have to know that. You didn't have to give a crap about invoices. But as a freelance, when you're working with companies, you're getting sponsorships. A lot of them request that you send an invoice. And, part of like what you were talking about, Flake, right, is knowing your worth. You have to negotiate stuff with people sometimes, knowing how to like sell yourself, market yourself, know how to promote your own strengths and say, this is the value I can bring. I didn't know that stuff when I was starting out with content. Like if I had known that kind of stuff when I was starting, I feel like I'd be even more successful now.
I'm on the cusp of selling myself to Perrin. That's where we're approaching soon. We're moving our way towards that.
I feel that, but yeah, like I'm not making it, much money, but I feel like I've still grown. I've been starting working on my taxes, and I have earned more than I was before. So it's progress, right? It still feels super slow. I'm still making like nothing, practically, like if you compare it to a quote unquote regular job, but putting myself in a spot to continuously learn, try to work on improving my content, improving my speech, how I talk, how I do podcasting, improve my casting, improve how I interact on stream. All of that has had noticeable impacts. So for me, it's like, I don't care about the technical stuff. Learn and teach yourself those types of skills, I think is the advice that I would give to people if you do want to get into this, because yeah, a lot of people have that in their heads. Oh, you're just going to go and play a game and get rich. And oh, you're just going to play, like you're just going to make money playing a game. Ha! No, it's not how it works.
So easy.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of dark to say, but it's the truth. And we're here for the truth. So I'm going to say the truth. I think one of the most important skills you can learn as a content creator is people, because you have to learn the explicit exploitation of people. Otherwise, you will A, be exploited, or B, fall into a cycle of exploiting others. And I think those are two wrong places to be in morally.
That's fair.
I feel like if you know people, then you can figure the rest out. Because it's from every direction of content creation, you're just interacting with people. Whether it's you getting paid or you entertaining, it's always an interaction with a person or a group of people. So if you learn people and you learn what people need and what people feel comfortable with and how different people interact, like if I have a stream and I'm streaming to competitive players or people who are looking to be competitive, my behavior might be much different and my risk aversion might be much different than it would be if I were appealing to players who were just looking to have fun, which might be different than I would appeal to an audience who I was interviewing for a paid sponsorship or gig, right? It's all, and they call that like shapeshifting or like chameleonism or whatever they call it. But I think it's kind of manipulation at like its base, but at the same time, what else do you do, right? I mean, I feel like it's all a part of you. As long as you're still being you at the end of the day, I really think you have to learn how to interact with different subsets of people, and I think that's a valuable skill. So, if you're trying to do content creation, learn how people work.
Well said.
So I think that concludes our roundtable topic of the week. We talked a lot about, and it's so odd that was the content creation was the topic of the week, and then we have these two announcements that are like right ahead of it. So interesting. But we do have what's called the lightning round. So the lightning round for you, the guest, is a quick gut reaction subset of questions that we might ask simultaneously, or not simultaneously. We'll alternate asking you. Sorry, we won't ask you 4 questions at the same exact time. We're going to alternate asking you them. And at the end, I usually have a question that I think of that I'm just so interested to know. So if you don't mind, just give me whatever you think off the top of your head. So for question numero uno, if you were a card from any of the card games that you've played, what card would you be and why?
Right off the top of my head, the first thing that came to my mind was Counterspell.
Ew.
Yeah.
Okay, that ain't on. Counterspell is one of my favorites. I love that card.
It's not like in a will actually kind of way. It's more so it's just one of those things where I like to sort of not ruin someone's expectation, but I like to perhaps alter or surprise people in terms of what they think is going to happen versus what they get to a degree. And that was just the first thing. You said lightning round, first thing that came to my mind.
Deal.
Love it. I'm pretty sure like every card game has a counterspell or some variant of it too. So I love it. All right, next question. What is your favorite type or archetype of deck to play?
Control, for sure. If we're going around the sort of that, I don't know, pie chart or whatever of what it is, you've got like aggro, mid-range, control, combo, things like that. To me, control has always been what has spoken to me because I like making decisions. I don't like just point click, go face kind of stuff like that. To me, I like to make sure that my win condition includes making decisions against your win condition. So to me, control, not heavy control, stuff like that. I still like to smush face a little bit, but ultimately control is what I'm best at. It's what I get the most enjoyment out of.
Okay. What's one goal you have for yourself in the card game universe?
I honestly want to be not necessarily remembered. I want to be regarded as a professional. I want to be regarded as somebody who not from a perspective of vanity or ego or anything, but I want to have other people strive to be like me to a degree, but not because I think I'm great. But that means that if someone strives to be like me, it's because I've accomplished something. Yeah. So it's kind of a consequence or a symptom of my own of being successful in that regard. And that would mean to me that if people think of me in high regard, it's because I've set myself, I've separated myself. Like one of the best things that I always hear is when somebody says, not necessarily that I'm the best caster, but I'm their favorite. That means that like my personality, my who I am has bled into the broadcast. It's on display, and who I am on this podcast, who I am broadcasting, who I am on my podcast, who I am in the street, who I'm at the bank, it's the same person. And that's one of the things that a lot of people are not necessarily surprised about, but just kind of come to realize, oh, you're the same, you're exactly the same. I'm like, fuck yeah, who else am I going to be? And that's kind of what I want to be known as, somebody who's genuine, sincere, but also a professional in the genre, in the industry, etc.
Love it.
Amen. Yeah, amen to that. Love that. All right. Last one that we have written down is, do you prefer physical or digital cards?
Physical for sure, 100%. And part of that is because when you're playing digital cards, you don't have the interaction element to it. You can't read your opponent. You can't see what they're holding on to, what they're holding here, coveting here, looking at here, what their ideas are. And I know that that's a skill, obviously, for poker players. Tannen Grace, I don't know if he's still around, but he's a huge poker player, and he knows better than anyone that you don't, when you're playing poker, most of the time you're not playing the cards, you're playing the player. And in card games, a lot of the times that's the same thing. Bluffing and all that kinds of thing, body language, etc. It all leads to gaining an edge or reading your opponent. And that's why I like playing paper games, because I'm very emotive when I play, but I can also be very reserved and quiet and whatnot. I usually mimic whatever behavior my opponent is. So I'm hard to read in that regard.
That's great.
It's just the best. If they want to be very expressive and crack jokes and whatever, absolutely. If they want to go into full, I'm cool with that too. So that's something that I much appreciate about card games, is being across from a player and just meeting them and then playing them.
Love it. So just from our conversation, I have gathered a few things that I have a guess.
Flake's an asshole. What?
Yes,
No.
a guess about. What are your top 3 pieces of media? Those could be TV, pieces of watchable media. So TV shows and or movies. Top 3.
Oh boy, that's really difficult. I can I group together Star Wars as just a thing together as one?
Definitely.
Star Wars all mushed together is number 1. Lord of the Rings all mushed together, number 2. And I'll probably say Marvel Comics / movies is number 3. Now, The Sopranos are right on their heels. Fresh Prince of Bel-Air is like one of the best shows ever made. Like all this kind of stuff, right? Like, it's super difficult. But if you can see, this is like what remains of my DVD collection, and it's all Seinfeld, Fresh Prince, and like maybe 10 movies that I like, and everything else was donated or given away. So
What were your thoughts about The Sopranos ending?
I thought the first time I saw it, I was a little disappointed, but the more I read about it, the more opinion pieces I got about it, the more I would listen to podcasts about the show, the more I dove into interviews with David Chase about it, the more I found the clues that actually sort of give a little bit of clarity to how the show ends, and the more I appreciate it. And I've rewatched that series 3 times in its entirety. It's my favorite, probably my favorite non-comedic TV show of all time. It's a masterpiece, in my opinion, of television, and I think that the ending was pretty special.
I'm not gonna lie,
the movie sucked, but that's another thing.
The first time I saw it, I was livid.
I would imagine.
What are you doing? What do you mean this is it?
Yeah, but you know what happens, right?
I know, but I don't know. I didn't read any opinion pieces.
I won't spoil it on here, but if you just Google what actually what really happens at the end of The Sopranos, and you find an article that actually digs through all the clues that are dropped throughout the series, you'll be like, okay, I get it.
All right, I know what I'm going to spend the rest of my night doing. Between that and Mr. Robot, it's going to be it's going to be that kind of a night. So I do appreciate you being on our podcast. I have had quite the pleasant experience with you. if you would be so kind as to let listeners know where they can find you so that you might be canceled.
Yeah, well, that's where we're getting at, right? First of all, thank you so much for allowing me to be on your show and for being gracious host, but also for putting up with me on my podcast. I'm usually a lot more reserved, and I don't get to express a lot of the inner demons that are usually picking away at me. But so I appreciate the platform. Yeah, no, this is therapy for me, my man. You can find me on Twitter at WatchFlake. You can find me on Twitch at WatchFlake as well. You can find me. My podcast is the InstantSpeed podcast. That's on Spotify. It's everywhere you can get it. It's also on YouTube. And I have a new podcast that's coming out shortly about Lorcana called Podcana, because we have big brains and that's the easiest thing. So Podcana, InstantSpeed podcast. I have a whole bunch of things going on the flow because you got to have your pen dipped in multiple inks to make it. So that's what we're doing.
Yeah,
I love
definitely, for sure. But yes, thank you so much for joining us. I know you and I have kind of been in communication about this. We set this up several weeks ago, so I am very glad that we got to do this. Unfortunately, you've been sick the last few days.
Yeah, it's been tough. But again,
yes,
I
so glad.
Things that I enjoy, it gives me energy. So this is something
Same.
that I would have. It would take a lot for me to have to miss this. So I appreciate again you guys having me
on. So now that we've got your podcast down, we've got your Twitter, we've got your Twitch. Are there any other things as we make our final stand to humanity that you would like to plug?
I don't know. Pay people what they're worth. That's it. That's my thing out into the ether. Is know your worth. And don't settle for less.
I love it. Dawn, anything from you?
No, just thank you so much again for joining us. Good luck this weekend at your tournament as well.
Thank you.
Well, as the stereotypical closing music starts to play and you hear our voices fade out, we'd like to thank you for joining us this week. If you or someone that you know would be interested in joining us, please reach out to us. You can email us at tccgroundtable@protonmail.com. You can follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/TCCG Roundtable. Use our top pinned tweet for a link to our Discord, or use the link in the description/show notes. Our Discord is available for any and everyone. Please join. Please have a conversation. And if you're looking for any type of specific thing, we can make a channel for you. Check out the video version on Dragonrider's personal YouTube at youtube.com/dragonriderTCCG. You can find us anywhere you can find your audio podcast. We're Apple or Spotify. You can find us in your grandmother's basement. And you can find us in the Inked Gaming affiliate market with our link that's also going to be linked in the show notes. You can find me individually at twitter.com/Itachi_HS. You can find Dragonrider at twitter.com/DonnieDK. And you can find Flake at the previously plugged channels. We appreciate everyone for listening. We hope you have a great night. And as always, don't settle for less than what you're worth.